and be able to conclude and quickly delve into the most important issues. All right?
Okay.
Thank you very much. Your name, sir, Dr. Badara Loum, correct?
Yes.
And you were born in Medina, Kanuma, in the North Bank region, correct?
Correct.
And you were born on the 1st of March, 1953.
Correct.
And you attended kindergarten at New Albion School and later at the Albion Primary School, correct?
Correct, correct.
You then proceeded to SL Primary School and attended Gambia High School.
Correct.
You thereafter went to the National Agricultural University in Ukraine in 1973, graduating in 1979.
Correct.
You are called doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Which discipline are you a doctor in? Is it medical or your PhD?
I have a DVM, a Doctor of Veterinary Medicine, as a degree, and also an MSc in Veterinary Science. Great.
And you joined the Gambia Civil Service in 1973?
Yes.
As a veterinary doctor?
No, in 73, I was a third-grade veterinary assistant.
Okay. And it was after that you were awarded a scholarship to go and do your DVM, yes. And you graduated in 1979.
Correct.
Yeah. And you rejoined the civil service, didn't you, upon your return?
Yes, I did.
And you rose to the rank of Deputy Permanent Secretary in 2000, and you were later promoted to Permanent Secretary.
Correct.
At the Ministry of Agriculture.
Yeah, it's correct, but I mean, I understand it's a compromise. But so many things happened between my being the Director of the Department of Livestock Services and eventually being a Permanent Secretary. It's a long story, but I understand, as you said, constrained by time and...
That is right. And in all honesty, too, interesting as those issues may be,
okay.
They are not central to your victimization.
I agree.
If they have a connection, feel free to make that connection.
I understand.
All right. Okay. So, as Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Agriculture, what were your responsibilities?
As Permanent Secretary, I was the Chief Advisor to the Minister of Agriculture. My main focus was on policy, strategy, planning, policy analysis and things like that. Otherwise, I have also had oversight responsibility for financial matters and also administrative issues.
And you would agree with me that that oversight responsibility for financial and administrative matters mean that you are the accounting officer or the principal accounting officer of that ministry?
I was the accounting officer. But apart from that, there was an accounting department, and the accounting department was headed by a principal accountant who worked directly under the Deputy Permanent Secretary for Finance and Admin. Here, maybe I can explain. I can expand on...
Please go ahead.
Permanent secretaries are considered to be accounting officers for ministries, wholly and solely because they will need to have to keep in mind the fact that financial instructions and also general orders are adhered to. There must be fiscal discipline, and it's only in that regard that permanent secretaries are accounting officers. They are not accounting officers for other issues, like if an officer within the ministry is given funds to manage, then the permanent secretaries are not responsible for those funds. They will have to spend and of course retire if need be, and impress if they are given an impress.
Well, that depends on how one sees it.
Okay.
But the permanent secretary would have overall responsibility, wouldn't he?
Oversight responsibility.
Overall oversight responsibility.
Okay.
And that oversight responsibility would also involve ensuring that others within the ministry who have responsibility would also discharge their responsibilities, wouldn't it?
Within reasonable limits. Because the permanent secretary is based in the ministry in Banjul. If an officer is based in CRR and is given resources to spend, it will not be easy for the permanent secretary in Banjul to keep track of every single brut that is spent. It is only when reconciliations are done, and if in the case that there is fraud, then it will come out through audit exercises and things like that.
Dr. Loum, we've been advised that we are going too fast. And the fact that we're having this conversation in English without consecutive interpretation means that we really, playing table tennis here.
Okay.
So let's slow the pace a little bit.
Okay.
So your position, therefore, is that it's not physically possible for the permanent secretary to know everything that is going on by those officers who are entrusted with some responsibility for finance. That's your suggestion, right?
That is my take on the issue. And aside from that, that is why there is, to a certain degree, decentralization. At each level, there are levels of responsibility, and there are people who are supposed to ensure that there is strict adherence to the guidelines set up by the Minister of Finance, by PMO, and so forth.
So let me put it this way. It can be agreed that every individual or every officer who is given a responsibility also bears primary responsibility for the correct discharge of those responsibilities, regardless of whether they're a superior or not. Would we agree to that?
That is true.
Okay. But that aside also, the superior within the ministry would have a responsibility to ensure that work within that ministry is done properly and that funds are accounted for, correct?
That is correct.
And that is on a general framework. It does not necessarily give rise to individual criminal responsibility for the acts of another person. Is that the position you take?
That is correct.
We would come back to this perhaps later. Let's talk about the programs that existed within the ministry whilst you were permanent secretary, focusing mainly on the fertilizer program. Tell us about it, the genesis, how it was supposed to be run, and the decentralization and the personalities involved.
Okay, the fertilizer in question was imported in 2003-2004 cropping season. And when it arrived at the port, it was taken, the delivery was taken by the supplies officer, who was called, the delivery was taken by the supplies officer.
Let me just interject here, sorry. From what you have said, the program was conceived or started around 2004 before you actually became permanent secretary.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah.
So, and the first arrival and delivery or supply of the fertilizer occurred while you were permanent secretary.
Exactly.
Okay. And you said the delivery was taken by who?
The supplies officer, who was called Trrc, who was the supplies officer. That would be equivalent now to a procurement, the head of procurement now. And also the storekeeper, who was called Ali Hussein. They discharged the cargo from the ports to the stores at GPA stores and also some stores belonging to GGC.
What was this program all about? Just to help a better understanding of the background and context.
Yeah, the background is that there was something called the Badia Export Financing Scheme that was funded by the Arab Bank. Funds are lent to developing countries, particularly within the Islamic Ummah. And the idea is that when you have the funding, you can identify what you want to import. In the case of Gambia, fertilizer was seen as a priority, and the funds were used to import fertilizer. And the idea was that it was supposed to sort of revolve. You take the fertilizer, sell it to the farmers. When they pay back to the Minister of Finance, they will decide on the next issue, the next option, what's the next priority. In the case of the Gambia, they thought the next priority was to buy diesel and petrol.
And for the 4 strands, you brought in fertilizer, correct?
Yeah, the fertilizer came in.
Okay. And could you explain to the Commission the arrangements that were put in place for the supply, sale and sale of the fertilizer, and the treatment of the proceeds?
Okay, the arrangement that has been in place even before I became permanent secretary, because I was in the ministry for 5 years before I became permanent secretary, so I know about the procedures that were in place. The idea has always been that when the fertilizer arrives at the ports, it is received by the stores section and then stored in warehouses in GPA and also at GGC, and then taken up country.
Received by the stores section?
Yeah.
Stores section of which institution?
The Ministry of Agriculture.
So it means, therefore, upon discharge at the ports, the Ministry of Agriculture takes possession over these fertilizer?
Yes. Then it is now transported. Before it's transported, of course, there are so many logistical arrangements which I might not have to go through the details, but eventually, at the tail end, what happens is that the Director of Agriculture sits together with the ministry and they decide on a distribution plan. How much fertilizer goes to which region?
The Director of Agriculture, functionally, is his directorate part of the Ministry of Agriculture?
It was at that time, it was a department under the Ministry of Agriculture. There were several departments under the Ministry of Agriculture. It has a director. Now they have director generals, but around that time they had a director.
And was the director answerable to the permanent secretary?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But was the director also an accounting officer?
Yes, to the extent with regards to allocations given to his department.
So what arrangements were discussed and agreed between the ministry and the department?
The guiding principle was that, number one, every consignment leaving the port's warehouse to any region would have to be accompanied with a delivery note. Each consignment that gets to any region, the Divisional Agricultural Coordinator, or the DAC, takes possession of the consignment and signs the delivery note, and a copy is returned to the store section of the ministry.
And what would be the next steps?
The next step would be sales, but sales, it had been established long, long ago, that is only on cash on the COD, cash on delivery. Credit sales was prohibited from many, many years because of so many bad experiences with fertilizer. So it was prohibited, and the idea was that you sell, and then the arrangement with the Ministry of Finance, because they negotiated the loan, the arrangement with the Ministry of Finance was that once the Divisional Agricultural Coordinators make their sale, they pay into a bank account at the Trust Bank. That bank account was managed by Finance, not the Ministry of Agriculture. We were not signatories, we didn't open it, and we didn't, we were not concerned about how the account was managed.
In a sense, the arrangement was Ministry of Finance would contract the revolving loan with Badea.
Yes.
Yes. The first step was procure fertilizer, supply it to the divisional agri coordinators, who would sell the fertilizer and refund government account with the Ministry of Finance. Was that the arrangement?
That was the arrangement.
In terms of responsibility, in that arrangement, who was responsible for the management of the proceeds of sale, all the way to the point that those funds are deposited into government accounts with the Ministry of Finance?
At the divisional level, the Divisional Agricultural Coordinator was responsible for the sales and also for banking of the proceeds. The proceeds would never get to the Minister of Agriculture. If, for example, the divisional coordinator in Basse makes sales, immediately he's supposed to lodge the proceeds into an account with the trust bank.
Was there a system in place for reporting back to the Ministry of Agriculture of tonnage received or quantities received, sales made, retirement of those funds, and stock balance? Was there such arrangement?
There was an arrangement in place. Every month, the head of the stores section, that's Mr. Ali Hussein, the director of agriculture, and also the supplies officer, they will go on track and do their reconciliation exercise. They reconcile cash that you have paid to the bank, your stock in your store, and also the outstanding balance. And on a monthly basis, reports are prepared and forwarded to the ministry, and the ministry distributes this report among all the stakeholders.
Was this procedure observed regularly?
It was observed regularly.
And to whom would these reports be disseminated?
It will, number one, be at the level of the ministry. We share it with the departments, the other departments within the ministry, and particularly the coordinators. It will only get outside the ministry if there is an issue that needs to be, like if we suspect that there is fraud, then we'll have to bring in the police or the report to the Secretary General. But ordinarily it will not get there unless there is suspicion.
Why is that the case? Why is it that you report, in the event of suspicion of fraud, you report to the Secretary General and or the police?
Yeah, because once it gets to that stage, there will not be much that the ministry can do. First of all, we ensure that there is transparency and the reconciliation is thorough. In case there is a query, there is a query, then we will invite the divisional agricultural coordinator to come down to the ministry and sit down with our accounts section, the Deputy Permanent Secretary of Finance and Admin, and go through the records again and ensure that we know exactly what the status is for every month. And then they will report to the Permanent Secretary.
And would the Permanent Secretary have an obligation to report to the Secretary General and to the police in the event there is suspicion for fraud?
Yes, yes. Once that is established, yes.
Okay. And you did tell us that this arrangement of regular checking, auditing, if you will, of all these supplies that were made to the divisional agri coordinators was scrupulously observed.
It was regular, but there was only one caveat that we need to maybe take into consideration. Because the total amount of fertilizer brought into the country was substantial. I think it was about 2,500 tons. It was spread over 2 cropping seasons. So even where the Trrc up country was regular, it was sometimes very difficult for the Director of Agriculture, the stores people, and also the supplies officer to quantify the tonnage that was in a store. Like they would go on Trrc, a whole store is open to them and say, they will be told that, well, I have, for example, 3,000 bags of fertilizer remaining here. And they can only take it as it is, or they will have to empty the store to confirm whether it is actually 3,000 or 2,700. That was the difficulty. So the total tonnage would only become clear when the store is empty, and it took 2 years.
Precisely. It means, therefore, a proper accounting. It was impossible to do proper accounting of the supplies during the first season.
Exactly. That is true.
And were there any suspicions at all during the first season?
The first season, no. The first season, because the team will go around and they see a store with stock, and it's difficult to quantify the stock. So it was only in the second season, when the stock started getting down, you look around, you suspect that although the agricultural coordinator is telling you that we have 5,000 bags here, but your estimation is that maybe it's not 5,000, maybe it's 2,000, maybe it's 3,000.
But as Permanent Secretary, wouldn't, okay, let me revise the question. the government accounting cycle is 1 year, isn't it?
I know, yeah.
And within that year, at the end of that accounting year, the government must account for all the funds and assets that's been entrusted to its officers, correct?
Yes, where it is possible.
Well, I don't think that in the general orders there is any place where it is stated if it is possible you account. Yeah. It just states that you have to account at the end of the year, isn't it?
That's what I wanted to clarify. If you have a store with 10,000 bags of, for example, let's say rice, it will be difficult on a yearly basis, on a monthly basis, and every day probably they will sell a few bags. On a monthly basis, on a yearly basis, to come December 31st, to say stop everything, bring out all the stock, let's count and put it in. That will cost money.
But that is the way things operate. In every entity, which an accounting cycle, at the end of that accounting cycle, you do a mandatory stock take and report.
For us in agriculture, even though the accounting cycle is very important, but the cropping calendar and the cropping season sometimes supersedes the fiscal calendar.
But that may be true.
Simply because at a point when the rainy season is starting and farmers need the fertilizer, you will need to ensure that it is available. It might overlap between one year, one cropping or financial accounting year and another.
I agree, yeah. Doctor, and that is very smart and prudent, but that is only limited to the supply angle of it. It has nothing to do with the accounting aspect, because for the accounting bit, it is mandatory under government rules that at the end of the fiscal year, you do an accounting of government resources that are entrusted to you.
I agree with you, but the reality is that, for example, when an auditor goes up country to audit the Division of Agricultural Coordinators, my take is that most likely the auditor will be shown the books, he or she will be shown the receipts of payments into lodgements into the account, and also the stock. They will tell the auditor, this is my stock here. And it might be that the auditor might insist, if the auditor insists that bring out everything, let's count, then I'm sure it will be done.
As a junior officer at Pete Marwick during my much younger days, I recall I used to be sent to all these hotels to do December 31st stock take. Well, everybody is busy partying. I am busy counting tomato tins and so on. But that is the way it is. That's the way it must be done.
It is possible.
Was it the culture in government that they did not really implement the rules properly?
No, I will not say that. The culture in government, meaning the whole of the government, I will not be able to say that.
Well, okay, let's take the Ministry of Agriculture. Was it that the way they did things was to just wait until the stock is finished or about finished before they do a stock take, or they would regularly follow the statutory prescriptions, which is to do a stock take at the end of the year?
They were doing the stock taking every month on a monthly basis. They will go around and then they prepare the report, which I have given you a copy of one such report. They go around and do it on a regular basis, on a monthly basis.
But you would agree with me that they were not actually doing physical stock take, because if they did, they would have discovered the discrepancies.
Yeah, but they did discover the discrepancy in the second year.
Only
in the second year.
Only in the second year.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So in the first year, they were not doing physical stock takes.
Simply because it would have been very costly, and maybe they didn't have the resources to do it. But I will not give an excuse. Maybe the divisional coordinators can't explain that.
No, I am here talking to the permanent secretary.
Yeah.
I am not necessarily attributing any form of responsibility for the failure. Maybe even if it is taken that far, it shouldn't be a problem. But what I am suggesting is that these were the government procedures that a physical stock take ought to have been made. Would you agree? regardless of what is the problem, a physical stock take ought to have been made?
I work in the Ministry of Agriculture for over 5, 6 years, 7 years. When we have had bulk cargo before, like number one, the Italian grant was rice. The Japanese grant was also rice. But even at the level of the ministry, when we had stores full of rice, it would have not have been physically possible to empty all those stores and count all those bags of rice and then put them back in. That would have been very expensive.
But these things, Dr. Loum, these ministries were full of highly educated people like yourselves. And there are systems which make it very easy to physically count these things by stacking them in batches that make it very easy to count, isn't it? Isn't that the case?
That would have been fine, but most of the time when you go to the stores, particularly the warehouses, bags of rice or even cement are not stacked nicely where you can count them and have an estimation.
But that is precisely the point. If I want to make sure that no one would come in and know exactly what is in my stock, I would not stack it in the way it is supposed to be done to enable easy counting.
Anyway, I would not want to maybe belabor the point, but all I'm telling you is that the reality is sometimes different from the ideal situation. The ideal situation would have been, of course, for everything in a store to be packed nicely, and then it's easy to count. But the reality is that that has not been the case.
And the point
with a lot of bulk cargo.
And the point I'm trying to put across is that proper systems should have been put in place to ensure that these things can be counted at the end of the year. Don't you think that should have been the case?
That would have been the ideal situation, and I agree with you that if it was done properly that way, for all the stocks, not only cement, not only fertilizer, but all the other bulk cargo that the ministry was in charge of, maybe it would have been easier. But
and in addition to the need to have put them properly, at the end of the year, government rules required that there should be a physical stock take and a report provided. Isn't that what the rules say?
Probably that's what the rule states, but the reality is that, at least at the Ministry of Agriculture, for the 5 years I was there, before I became the permanent secretary, for each consignment, whether it is rice, fertilizer, or something else, the exercise is centered around the cargo that came. If, for example, 3,000 metric tons of fertilizer comes, a report is only written at the end of the exercise, like they discharge 3,000, or the stores people will write a report and say, although the invoice is saying that we are supposed to receive 3,000 tons of fertilizer, we received 2,985 bags, and that's what we have in stock in the store. Then the storekeeper is responsible because he has a key to the store, and every single bag that goes out is accompanied by a delivery note to wherever it is going. So if there is a shortage, it is the storekeeper who is answerable because he has physical...
We haven't quite come to that point yet, and we would come to it, and I doubt whether there would be a disagreement on that. For now, let us just focus on the government system.
Okay.
My position is that the system is that when these materials arrive, they should be counted.
Yes.
And during stated intervals, they should be audited and there should be a physical count. At least at the end of the financial year, there should be a physical count and therefore adequate accounting of the assets that the government has entrusted on its officers.
Okay. My take on it is that even if it's not the end of the financial year, if there is a consignment that comes, at the beginning, everything is accounted for how much has gone into the store. If the consignment is being discharged, at the end of the exercise, a report is written. It might overlap between the two financial years, but the exercise is complete when the cargo is received, stored, and discharged, and a report is written. There are several reports like that in the files in the Ministry of Agriculture.
Indeed. But in this particular instance, this fertilizer cargo we're talking about, there was no adequate reporting in the first season. You agree with that?
There was reports based on the Trrc reports that I have given you a copy, monthly trackings.
But you would agree that there was no adequate reporting?
I will not agree.
Do you have a report in which the entire stock of fertilizer that was contained in all these stores were physically counted?
No.
Okay. In the absence of that physical counting, would you say that the reports generated were accurate?
No, as I had mentioned earlier, it might not be accurate because it will be difficult to quantify what is in a store that is, as you said, not stacked as in the ideal situation.
In fact, the reports were therefore based on guesstimates.
Well, I will not say that. Maybe the authors of the report can shed light on that, but I will not think that it's
I think this is an easy point that we can easily agree on and we move on. Like I said, I'm not necessarily attributing responsibility for the losses onto you.
No.
Okay, what I am just trying to drive at is that the system that was in place was not effectively implemented. Would you agree to that?
Yes, I will agree, just so that we can move on.
No, agree with me simply because that is the truth. Don't agree with me because it is convenient to do so.
Okay, the reality is that physically counting those bags every month would have been very difficult. It would have been costly also. So it was not done. That I can tell you. It was not done because physically it was a challenge. If you have a store with over 3,000 bags of fertilizer, every month you bring every single bag out, labor costs. I think it's $4 or $5 out, $4 or $5 in. And there was acute shortage of labor. I know that because from the groundnut sector we had problems with labor. Even there was a point when we were importing labor from Senegal to help with just moving bags of groundnuts.
I agree with that.
Okay.
That situation made it possibly very difficult.
Yeah.
But that the government rules were that at the end of the financial year, you have a complete accounting of all the assets and at least in this case, the fertilizer that was in all the stores. That was to be done.
Okay, all right.
You agree? All right. And the second year, when you did the monthly Trrcs, you discovered some discrepancies, correct?
Yes.
And what are the requirements or what are the responsibilities of, say, the permanent secretary in the event some discrepancies were discovered?
First of all, there was need to bring all the divisional coordinators together with the Director of Agriculture for them to sit down with the head of finance and admin, that's the DPS for finance and admin, and then to go through this report meticulously and to find out if indeed there were shortages, what was the responsibility and what's the response of the divisional agricultural coordinators.
At least.
Yeah, so that was, in this particular case, they were invited and they were supposed to sit down and then go through the report and find out what was responsible for the variances. You've seen the variances. It was only one division that had no variances, that was West Coast. Okay.
So in a sense, after the initial audit, those with discrepancies had to be given an opportunity to come and explain how those discrepancies happened.
Yes.
And it is only, at what stage would you have to report this issue to the Secretary General or to the police?
Like the intention was that I think they were given a week or 2 weeks, it was in the report, that they were supposed to come down and explain to us what's going on. Sometimes those who have shortages can even sell properties and cover their shortages. And that would have been fine with the ministry. But we had said, let them come down to the ministry and explain. If the explanation makes sense, then fine. If it doesn't make sense, the next day we're supposed to write a report and forward it to the Secretary General.
I have a document here. It's called Fertilizer Reconciliation Report as of 22nd November 2006, Department of State for Agriculture.
Yeah.
Could you take a look at the document, please?
Yeah. Yeah.
You confirm that that's what the document says, that's the title?
Yes.
Is this a document from the ministry in which you worked at the time?
Yes.
You provided this document, correct?
I did.
Could you give us a brief explanation of the contents? Just briefly.
Okay, it is one of the many reports that were prepared during the period when this fertilizer stock was with the Divisional Agricultural Coordinators. As I said, every month there is a requirement for the Director of Agriculture to go around together with the stores section of the ministry, and then they would look at the stocks available at the level of the regions, go to the books of the Divisional Agricultural Coordinators to find out how much money has been paid into the account at Trust Bank, and then compare it with the total value of the fertilizer that was received by individual Divisional Agricultural Coordinators. If there is a variance, then the variance is stated. If there is any explanation, then it is put in the remarks column.
For this particular report,
yeah.
were any variances or discrepancies found?
Yes, for all the regions apart from Western Division. Then it was a division, Western Division. For Western Division, there was no discrepancy. The total amount of fertilizer that was given to the Divisional Agricultural Coordinator were all sold, and the total amount of money was lodged in the accounts. So he had no problems at all. And
do I take that to mean that for all other divisions there was a discrepancy?
Yes.
On this particular instance, what was the total shortfall in terms of money?
The discrepancies, $2.6 million.
The entire shortfall?
Yes.
Or are you talking about from one division?
No, I'm talking about the total. That's the total. No. Okay, let me check. The aggregate is 10.5 million.
10.5 million,
yeah,
correct.
Right, yeah.
Thank you. Could you pass the document to the chair, please? And Mr. Chair, we will ask that this document be exhibited. It should be exhibit 127A, if you agree. And on this particular occasion, you would agree that this was a major problem within the ministry? Or,
yes.
Yes.
We recognize that.
Yes. And according to the way in which the ministry operated, who would have been responsible for these discrepancies that were identified?
It would have been the Divisional Agricultural Coordinators.
Why did you say that?
Because they received the stock of fertilizer, they stored it in their stores, they sold it to farmers, and they were supposed to pay the proceeds into the Trust Bank account managed by the Ministry of Finance.
So, in a sense, you're saying that the Divisional Agricultural Coordinators were directly responsible for the management, disposal, and accounting of the proceeds that surrounded this fertilizer.
Exactly.
Did the permanent secretary or the director of agriculture have anything to do with the management of this fertilizer and the proceeds of its sale?
The director of agriculture was the overall head of the Department of Agriculture. All the divisional agricultural coordinators work under the director, and they report to the director. So in a way, he had just oversight responsibility, but in terms of the physical responsibility for the stock and the monies, it was really the coordinators who were also people who have degrees in agriculture. They were not junior staff, they were senior staff. Mostly they had masters in agriculture. So they were senior staff.
On this particular occasion, did the period you had given the DACs to come and report back arrangements to make good the discrepancies, did anything happen in the intervening period?
Yeah, in the intervening period, I was arrested.
Could you tell us how that happened?
Well, I had just come back from a trip to Abuja with the Honorable Minister of Agriculture. But prior to my departure, I have handed over the reconciliation report to my deputy, who is the PS2, and asked him to work with the Deputy Permanent Secretary for Finance and Admin, and then they were supposed to bring all the DACs and review the reconciliation report and report back to me when I get back home. I got back home, and within 2 days, 3 days, I was arrested.
Did you have the opportunity to sit together with your staff to?
No, I did not. I did not.
Okay. And how did your arrest come about? Can you explain?
Yeah, it was on a Wednesday, 13th December 2006. I received a call from one Usman Jallo, who identified himself to be an agent of the NIA. Now he asked me where I was. I told him, well, I am around. He said, can you tell me exactly where you are? Because my director wants you to come and shed light on some issues. I told him, okay. I asked him instead, where are you? And he said that he was at my home in Carnegie Estate, waiting for me, and that I should come immediately. I think that particular day there was a delegation from the EU, and we were having a meeting in Baobab restaurant. They were insisting that I would tell them where I was, but my suspicion was that if I tell these people where I am, since they had identified themselves as being agents of the NIA, maybe they would just pick me from the meeting room and take me wherever. That's why I said, okay, let me meet you at home. I drove home. When I got home, I found, just by the gate to my compound, a pickup, white pickup with NAWEC number plates. And immediately I got home, the two officers alighted from the vehicle, and then they identified themselves as Mr. Lamin Dabo and Usman Jallo. And they told me that they are agents of the NIA. Their director wanted to speak to me. Can I follow them to the NIA office now? I told them, fine, but please let me go in and inform my family that I am under arrest. They told me, no, it's not necessary. You see, we just want to have a small chat with you at the NIA, so if you go into a house, you're going to bring problems, so it's not necessary. I insisted. I told him, look, my wife is not around. Only the children are in the house. Let me at least tell my children that I'm being arrested. So in the end, there was push and pull, but in the end they said, okay. The compromise that they suggested was that, why don't you ask your wife to come out? So at least if you just talk to your wife, then we can go. I told them that my wife has traveled, she's not around. That was when Lamin Dawo, one of the agents, accompanied me into the house, and I saw my children. At that time, Suleiman was the eldest. I told Suleiman, well, these gentlemen say they are from the NIA. They are here to arrest me. And they have asked me to accompany them. So Suleiman told them, well, can you please show us your ID, just to confirm that you are NIA agents? They refused completely. I told my son, okay, it doesn't matter. I'll just follow them. But before I left, I told him, well, since you are the eldest, make sure that you take care of the children. I am going, I don't know when I will come back. So that's how I left with them. And then when we left...
Did you join their vehicle?
No, they asked me to drive my official government vehicle. And they followed me with their NAWEC pickup. But also one thing that struck me was that I was wearing a very light shirt, and I was told, doctor, can you please go and change your shirt? This is too light. That's when I started suspecting that something was not right. What were
your suspicions?
Well, that maybe I'm there for the long haul. The reason why I suspected was that around that time, there were 2 or 3 permanent secretaries at Mile 2, and some at the NIA, like, I don't want to name names, but so many people. So
well, this is a matter of public record. So.
Yeah, I know, it's in the public domain.
Yeah.
But I had friends like the director of the PS4 works, Lamin Sane C, who died in the end. Omar Ndao was there.
Ndao of?
Gamtel, the managing director of Gamtel at that time. Fodebari was there. Lamin.
Which Fodebari?
Fodebari of the NIA. He was there with us. Well, eventually I joined them, eventually. Then there was also, I mean, half of the government was there. I can tell you,
Did I hear you say half of the government was there?
I mean the top echelon of government.
So arrest and detention of senior government officials
at that time was the norm. That was why I had my suspicion. When this guy asked me to wear something heavy, I said, well, maybe I'm also in for it.
And how about the direction that you drive your government vehicle?
Yeah,
Does that indicate something?
No, they asked me to drive through Bakau because my deputy lived in Bakau, and they asked me to show them the compound of my deputy in Bakau. So I went with them to Bakau, to my deputy's residence, and they asked me to wait at the gate. I waited at the gate, and it was for a long time. Then eventually, Usman Diallo, who seemed to be their boss, told me, okay, let's drive to Banjul. He left the pickup with the other guys and said, okay, you can come with Mr. Jaitu, who is my deputy. I drove with him towards Banjul, but when we got to around mile 2, he asked me to park off the road and wait for my deputy. I parked off the road and waited, and after some time, my deputy just came, he overtook us and went straight into, I saw him going into mile 2. So I turned around, I told him, so this is where we're going. He said, well, yes, that's where we're going. I said, okay. I followed them, and we drove straight into mile 2. When we got into mile 2, my vehicle had some of my personal belongings, like my mobile phone and so forth. I removed the government mobile phone. I told them, look, this belongs to the government, but this phone is mine. They said, okay, don't worry, we'll get it back to your children. I gave them my brand new phone, and that was the last time I saw that phone.
Did it ever get back to your children?
No, no. The government phone, I'm not sure whether it ever got to the government also. Yeah, I don't know. So,
so which of the officers did you give it to?
Honestly, I don't remember which one, but it must have been either Lamin Dabo or Usman Diallo. I cannot remember.
Which one of them did you ride with?
The two of them, they were in my vehicle. Okay. No. In my vehicle, I was with Usman Diallo. But when we got to mile 2, it was a free fall. They opened my vehicle, they came in, and a couple of them were looking around the vehicle.
You cannot tell which one of them you gave it to?
No, I don't know. To be quite honest, I don't know.
All right. So, did they tell you what you were doing at mile 2?
No, they did not. They did not. It was when I went in and I was searched and all my personal items were removed from me. And that was when they gave me a cautionary form and say, please write here everything you know about the fertilizer.
Where in mile 2 were you given this form?
In an office inside mile 2. I don't know exactly whose office. By now, it was around 7:30, going on towards 8. And it was an office inside the prisons. I don't know exactly which office. So I was asked to write everything I know about the fertilizer and also about the APRC tractors. I wrote this very short statement. I say, about the fertilizers, I was not there when it was imported. I was not responsible for storage, transportation, or sales. I was the permanent secretary working at the ministry. For the fertilizer, what I just described for you, it is imported, it is the DAX that receive it, store it, and they sell it, and they bank the proceeds. And that was all. For the tractors, I say I've never seen any tractor belonging to APA. I say that was given to me. I don't know the procedure. I don't know how it was distributed, so I was not involved with APRC tractors. Was your statement satisfactory? At that point, I think they said, fine, it's okay. It was much later that they had me to... But having read the statement and being satisfied with your explanation, did they let you go? Let me go? No. From there, I was marched into the prison security wing number 5, and frog marched into a cell that was terrible. Were you told the offense you committed? No, I was not told. I was not told. Were you charged with an offense? No, I was not charged with an offense. Were you given the opportunity to call your family to inform them that you were being jailed? No, I didn't have the opportunity. Were you given an opportunity to talk to a lawyer? No, I was not. So apart from being booked, searched, and given a cautionary statement, there was nothing that was done with you before you were put in the jail. Exactly. How did you feel
being a senior government official, being put into maximum security prison without any formal process?
Yeah, strangely enough, I was just angry. I was not even scared. I was just angry that look at me here. I know that I have done nothing, absolutely. Yet this is how my government decides to pay me for my services. That was my feeling. I was not even scared. It got to a stage where I did not even really care at all. I was saying that I am just mad. I'm angry because I'm being treated wrongly. That was all.
And how did you find the maximum security wing number 5? Give us a good description.
The good description is that eventually when I had access to my friends, Loum, Sani and the others, they told me one day this place will be turned into an animal pen. I told them, if you bring animals here, they will die. I'm a veterinarian, I'm telling you, this place is not fit for animals. That might be a good description, I don't know. But I can tell you it was just horrible. Anything that you can think of, I am still flabbergasted that to this day, that prison is still existing. For me, I thought it should be just raised to the ground and please let them build another prison anywhere else. It is just not the type of place that you can keep human beings.
Made us understand how it looked and felt being there in the inside.
Yeah, first of all, maybe in my naivety, when I went in, I told the guy, you've forgotten to put the light on. He told me, what light? There is no light here. Then I looked around. There was something that looked like a bed sheet. But it was smelling so badly that I decided just to remove it and put it on the floor. Because there was a straw mattress.
You didn't realize that within a week it would be luxurious to have it?
Yeah, I did not. Maybe I didn't. It did not gel into my mind that this is your reality, that you will have to live with. It probably that it was, as I said, anything that you cannot. I mean, in the morning, if anybody had told me that you end up in jail tonight, I would have thought that the guy is a lunatic. So I was not prepared for it. Maybe that's why it did not register immediately. But as I said, eventually, when it gelled in my mind that this is your current reality, I was just mad. I was angry, but not scared. I thought that since I am certain that I have done nothing wrong, eventually I'll be exonerated. I don't know how long it's going to take, and it took a long time.
Well, Mr. Chair, it's 5 p.m. We can leave it at that for today, and we finish on Monday. Except, of course, if the learned chair overrules me, I'll be more than happy to proceed.
No, Council, I won't overrule you this time around. And thank you very much, and thank you, Dr. Loum.
Thank you.
And we will continue our proceedings with you on Monday morning, if that's okay with you.
Thank you.
Splendid. Thank you very much, Council. We will continue. Council, on the application that you made them is granted, but the number that you gave, 127, is that 128? It should be, yeah, because 127 was already assigned with the last witness, I think. Okay, fine. Yes, thank you very much. We will see you all Monday morning, 10 o'clock. Thank you very much. Meeting is adjourned.